My name is Michelle, and 2 months ago I discovered my boss's son had been systematically stealing company equipment and selling it online using my employee credentials. For 6 months, Kyle had been forging my signature on purchase orders using my discount codes and making me look like the mastermind of a $45,000 theft operation. The digital evidence I gathered sent him to prison and exposed his father's cover up. Before I dive into this story of workplace nepotism and equipment theft, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever suspected your boss was covering for family members at work, and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories where serial numbers catch the criminals red-handed. I'm 32 years old and I work as an IT procurement specialist at TechSource Solutions, a mid-sized technology consulting firm in Denver, Colorado. My job involves purchasing computer equipment, software licenses, and technical supplies for our company and our clients. I manage vendor relationships, negotiate bulk pricing contracts, and oversee our equipment inventory to ensure we always have the technology resources needed for our consulting projects. TechSource employs about 85 people and serves clients ranging from small startups to Fortune 500 companies. We help businesses implement new technology systems, upgrade their IT infrastructure, and train their staff on digital tools. Our work requires us to have access to the latest equipment for testing, demonstrations, and client installations. As the procurement specialist, I have access to significant employee discounts from major technology vendors like Dell, HP, Lenovo, and Apple. These discounts can range from 15% to 40% off retail prices, which helps our company manage costs while ensuring we have cutting-edge equipment for our consulting work. My boss, David Chen, is a 51-year-old former software engineer who founded TechSource 12 years ago. David is generally a good leader, knowledgeable about technology, supportive of his employees, and committed to growing the business. He's always been fair with me regarding budgets, purchasing decisions, and professional development opportunities. About 8 months ago, David's son Kyle started working part-time at TechSource while finishing his senior year at the University of Colorado, Denver. Kyle was 19, studying business management, and according to David, he was interested in learning about the technology industry to potentially join the company full-time after graduation. Kyle was assigned to general office duties and basic IT support tasks like setting up new employee workstations, organizing our equipment storage room, and assisting with client equipment installations. It was entry-level work, but David made it clear that Kyle needed to prove himself just like any other employee. "I want Kyle to understand the business from the ground up," David explained during a staff meeting. "No special treatment just because he's my son. If he wants to be part of TechSource's future, he needs to earn it." Kyle seemed motivated and professional during his first few months. He was punctual, helpful to colleagues, and appeared to be learning the technical aspects of our business quickly. Several of our senior consultants mentioned that Kyle was asking good questions and showing genuine interest in understanding client needs. "Kyle's really been stepping up lately," David mentioned during one of our weekly management meetings. He's been helping with inventory organization and even suggested some improvements to our equipment storage system. I'm proud of his initiative. I was glad to hear that Kyle was contributing positively to the company. As the person responsible for managing our technology inventory, I appreciated having extra help with the organizational aspects of equipment management. But about 6 months ago, I started noticing some irregularities in our equipment purchasing and inventory records that didn't quite add up. Our inventory management system showed that we'd purchased significantly more laptops, tablets, and networking equipment than what was actually present in our storage room or assigned to employees. The discrepancies weren't huge on a monthly basis, but over several months, the missing equipment represented tens of thousands of dollars worth of technology. Initially, I assumed the discrepancies were due to record-keeping errors or equipment that had been deployed to client sites without proper documentation. In a busy consulting firm, it's not unusual for equipment to be moved around quickly to meet client deadlines, and sometimes the paperwork doesn't catch up immediately. But when I tried to reconcile the records by tracking down the supposedly missing equipment, I couldn't locate any of it. The serial numbers in our system didn't match any equipment I could find in our office, at client sites, or in our storage facilities. More concerning, the purchase orders for the missing equipment all bore my signature and used my employee discount codes, but I had no memory of making many of these purchases. The orders were for legitimate business equipment that we regularly bought, but the quantities and timing didn't align with any projects or client needs I could recall. For example, our records showed that I'd ordered 12 Dell laptops in March using my employee discount, but we'd only needed 6 laptops for a client implementation that month. The other 6 laptops were nowhere to be found, and there were no records of them being assigned to employees or deployed to client sites. When I brought these discrepancies to David's attention during our monthly procurement review, he seemed unconcerned. "You've been handling a lot of orders lately, Michelle. It's easy to lose track of equipment when we're juggling multiple client projects," he said. "I'm sure the missing items will turn up when we do our quarterly inventory audit." His casual response surprised me. David was usually very detail-oriented about company assets and expenses. Equipment theft or loss was a serious concern for any technology consulting firm, and I'd expected him to want a thorough investigation. But David's lack of concern made me more suspicious, not less. If the missing equipment represented simple record-keeping errors, why wasn't he interested in finding and correcting those errors? And why did all the problematic purchase orders happen to bear my signature and discount codes? I decided to investigate more systematically. I started cross-referencing our purchase orders with bank records, vendor invoices, and inventory logs to create a comprehensive picture of what equipment had actually been bought, received, and distributed. The investigation revealed a disturbing pattern. Over the past 6 months, someone had been using my employee credentials to purchase approximately $45,000 worth of computer equipment that never made it into our official inventory system. The equipment was being bought with legitimate purchase orders that appeared to have my authorization, but it was disappearing immediately after delivery. Even more concerning, the purchase orders were being processed outside of our normal approval workflow. Typically, equipment purchases over $1,000 require secondary authorization from David or another senior manager. But these orders were going through with only my signature, suggesting someone was bypassing our established procurement controls. I realized that someone with access to our ordering system was forging my signature, using my discount codes, and stealing equipment in a way that would make me appear responsible if discovered by auditors or law enforcement. Timing of the thefts aligned perfectly with Kyle's work schedule. The suspicious purchase orders were almost always processed on days when Kyle was working in the office, and the missing equipment corresponded to items that Kyle would have had access to in our receiving and storage areas. But I needed more concrete evidence before making accusations against my boss's son. False allegations of employee theft could destroy my career and potentially expose the company to wrongful accusation lawsuits. That's when I decided to conduct some online research to see if our missing equipment was being sold through digital marketplaces. I started searching eBay, Facebook Marketplace, and Craigslist for listings that matched the serial numbers of our missing equipment. Technology resellers often include serial numbers in their listings to verify authenticity and warranty coverage, so if our equipment was being sold online, there was a good chance I could find it. Within an hour of searching, I found listings for 3 of our missing Dell laptops on eBay. The serial numbers matched exactly with equipment that our records showed I'd purchased using my employee discount, but which had never appeared in our inventory system. The eBay seller was listed as techdeals_19 and had a feedback rating of 98% positive with over 200 completed transactions. The seller's location was listed as Denver, Colorado, and the items were being shipped from a residential address. When I looked up the shipping address, it led directly to David Chen's home address. Kyle was running a systematic equipment theft operation, using my employee credentials to purchase company equipment at discounted prices, then immediately selling that equipment on eBay for significant profits. But the scheme was even more sophisticated than simple theft. By using my employee discount and purchase authorization, Kyle was making the stolen equipment purchases appear legitimate in our company's financial records. If auditors discovered the missing inventory, all the evidence would point to me as the person who'd made the unauthorized purchases. I spent the next several days documenting everything I could find. I created spreadsheets matching our missing inventory serial numbers with active eBay listings. I took screenshots of Kyle's seller profile, including his shipping address and transaction history. I printed copies of the fraudulent purchase orders that bore my forged signature. The evidence was overwhelming. Kyle had been systematically stealing company equipment for 6 months, generating approximately $30,000 in eBay sales revenue from stolen inventory that had cost the company $45,000 to purchase. But I also realized that Kyle couldn't have executed this scheme without help. He would have needed access to our procurement system to generate purchase orders, knowledge of my discount codes to get the reduced pricing, and coordination with our receiving processes to intercept equipment before it reached our inventory system. Either Kyle had somehow gained unauthorized access to confidential company systems, or someone with legitimate access was helping him. Given David's lack of concern when I'd reported the inventory discrepancies, and given that Kyle's eBay operation was shipping from David's home address, I began to suspect that David was aware of, and possibly facilitating, his son's theft operation. I decided to report my findings to our company's board of directors rather than confronting David directly. TechSource is privately held, but we have a 3-person advisory board that includes 2 outside business leaders who provide strategic guidance and oversight. I prepared a comprehensive report documenting the missing inventory, the forged purchase orders, the eBay evidence, and the timeline of thefts. I included screenshots, financial records, and a detailed analysis showing how Kyle's scheme had been designed to frame me as the responsible party. The board took my allegations very seriously and immediately hired an external auditing firm to conduct a thorough investigation of our procurement processes and inventory management. The professional audit confirmed everything I discovered and revealed additional evidence I hadn't found on my own. The auditors had access to more sophisticated digital forensics tools and were able to trace the fake purchase orders back to a computer in our office that Kyle had been using. More damning, the auditors discovered email communications between David and Kyle discussing inventory management and equipment disposal in terms that clearly indicated they both knew equipment was being removed from company premises for personal profit. In one particularly incriminating email exchange, Kyle had asked his father about moving more units this month, and David had responded with suggestions about which equipment wouldn't be missed from inventory counts. The audit also revealed that David had been using his administrative access to our procurement system to approve Kyle's fraudulent purchase orders without the secondary authorization that company policy required for large equipment orders. Both David and Kyle were terminated immediately, and the company filed criminal charges for theft, fraud, and computer crimes. Criminal investigation that followed was thorough and devastating for both father and son. Police seized Kyle's eBay inventory, which included dozens of pieces of stolen TechSource equipment that he hadn't yet sold. They also recovered approximately $22,000 in cash and eBay proceeds from his bank accounts. Digital forensics experts analyzed our company's computer systems and found extensive evidence of David and Kyle coordinating the theft scheme through internal email, shared documents, and system access logs. The most damaging evidence came from Kyle's own eBay account. His seller feedback and transaction history created a comprehensive record of stolen equipment sales, including buyer communications where Kyle had represented himself as a legitimate technology reseller with access to corporate overstock inventory. Kyle was charged with multiple felonies: theft, computer fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. David was charged with theft, abuse of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Case was particularly strong because the digital evidence was so extensive and clear. Every stolen piece of equipment could be traced from our purchase order system to Kyle's eBay listings, creating an undeniable paper trail of systematic theft. Kyle ultimately pled guilty to avoid a lengthy trial and was sentenced to 18 months in state prison plus 3 years of supervised probation. He was also ordered to pay $45,000 in restitution to cover the full cost of the stolen equipment. David initially tried to claim that he'd been unaware of Kyle's activities, but the email evidence and system access logs made that defense impossible. He pled guilty to conspiracy charges and received 2 years in prison plus 4 years of probation. Both convictions became part of their permanent records, effectively ending any future they might have had in the technology industry. The experience taught me valuable lessons about workplace nepotism, and the importance of maintaining strict controls over company assets and access codes. I'd always assumed that family members working together would be more trustworthy, not less, but David and Kyle's case proved that family relationships can actually facilitate more sophisticated forms of fraud. I also learned the importance of trusting my instincts when something seems wrong with company processes or financial records. When David dismissed my concerns about the inventory discrepancies, I should have escalated the issue immediately rather than spending weeks trying to investigate on my own. The digital nature of modern business makes this type of fraud both easier to commit and easier to detect. Kyle's eBay operation left a comprehensive electronic trail that documented every aspect of his theft scheme, but it also relied on his father's system access and willingness to abuse his position of trust. Today, I work as the IT procurement director at a larger consulting firm that has more robust controls on equipment purchasing and inventory management. All purchase orders over $500 require electronic approval from 2 different managers, and our inventory system uses barcode scanning to track every piece of equipment from receipt to deployment. I also regularly audit my own purchase records and immediately report any discrepancies, even minor ones. The experience with Kyle's scheme taught me that small irregularities can be early warning signs of much larger problems. The most satisfying outcome wasn't Kyle and David's convictions, but the knowledge that other employees at TechSource were protected from similar schemes. The external audit revealed that Kyle had been attempting to expand his operation by trying to gain access to other employees' discount codes and purchase authorization. The new ownership of TechSource, the company was sold after David's conviction, implemented comprehensive anti-fraud measures and recovered most of the stolen equipment value through insurance claims and asset recovery. I occasionally encounter former TechSource employees who remember the Chin family theft case, and they always express amazement at how sophisticated the scheme was and how completely it destroyed both Kyle and David's careers. "Did you suspect from the beginning that David was involved?" one former colleague asked me recently. "Not initially," I replied. "I thought Kyle might be stealing equipment, but I assumed David was just being negligent about oversight. I had no idea he was actively coordinating the thefts until the audit revealed their email communications." The experience reinforced my belief that workplace fairness and security require vigilant oversight from multiple people, not just trust in individual family relationships. When business controls rely too heavily on personal trust rather than systematic verification, they become vulnerable to exactly the kind of abuse that David and Kyle orchestrated. The digital evidence that convicted both father and son also demonstrated how modern technology creates permanent records of both legitimate business activities and criminal behavior. While they used technology systems to facilitate their thefts, those same systems provided the proof needed to achieve justice. The aftermath of Kyle and David's conviction had lasting effects throughout the Denver technology consulting community. Word of the father-son theft scheme spread quickly through industry networks, and several other companies began conducting their own internal audits to check for similar vulnerabilities. Within 6 months of the convictions, 3 other Denver area consulting firms discovered equipment theft schemes involving employee discount abuse, though none were as extensive or sophisticated as Kyle's operation. The heightened awareness in the industry led to industry-wide changes in how technology companies handle employee purchasing privileges and family member employment. TechSource itself went through a difficult transition period after David's termination. As the founder and primary business development leader, David had been responsible for most of our major client relationships. When news of his conviction became public, several clients terminated their contracts, concerned about working with a company that had been involved in such a significant fraud case. Company's board of directors made the difficult decision to sell TechSource to a larger consulting firm based in California. The acquisition protected most employee jobs, but it effectively ended the independent company that David had built over 12 years. I was retained as IT procurement director for the new ownership, and my role in exposing the theft scheme actually enhanced my reputation within the expanded organization. The new management viewed my investigation as evidence of strong analytical skills and ethical integrity, qualities they wanted to promote throughout their operations. But the transition wasn't easy for everyone. Several long-term TechSource employees who had worked closely with David felt conflicted about his conviction. They'd respected him as a leader and mentor, and they struggled to reconcile that relationship with the evidence of his criminal behavior. "I just can't believe David would risk everything for a few $1,000s," one senior consultant told me during the transition period. He had a successful business, a good reputation, and a bright future. Why would he throw it all away to help Kyle sell stolen laptops? That conversation highlighted one of the most puzzling aspects of the entire case. David wasn't financially desperate or facing business difficulties that might have motivated criminal behavior. TechSource was profitable, growing, and well regarded in the industry. David's decision to facilitate Kyle's theft scheme seemed to stem from misguided family loyalty rather than financial necessity. During the legal proceedings, David's attorney argued that he'd been trying to help Kyle learn about business and entrepreneurship, and that he hadn't fully understood the legal implications of allowing Kyle to sell company equipment. But the email evidence made it clear that David knew exactly what he was doing and had actively helped Kyle avoid detection. In one particularly damaging email exchange that was read aloud during David's sentencing hearing, Kyle had expressed concern about getting caught, and David had responded with detailed advice about how to avoid triggering inventory audits and how to spread out the thefts to avoid detection. "Just don't take more than 2 or 3 units per month," David had written. "And make sure they're items that Michelle doesn't track closely. The big ticket stuff gets noticed, but tablets and accessories tend to fall through the cracks." That email proved that David wasn't just passively allowing Kyle's thefts. He was actively strategizing about how to steal company property more effectively. Kyle's behavior during the legal process was equally revealing. Instead of showing remorse for his actions or concern about the damage he'd caused to the company and its employees, Kyle seemed primarily frustrated that he'd been caught. During his deposition, Kyle complained that his eBay business had been really taking off, and that the investigation had ruined everything just when he was starting to make significant profits. He appeared to view the theft scheme as a legitimate business venture that had been unfairly shut down, rather than a criminal enterprise that had defrauded his father's company. "I was learning about supply chain management and e-commerce," Kyle told investigators. "My dad was always saying I needed to understand business from the ground up, so I was just applying what I'd learned about procurement and resale." That statement revealed the extent to which Kyle had rationalized his criminal behavior as entrepreneurial activity. He genuinely seemed to believe that stealing company equipment and selling it online was a form of business education rather than theft. The psychological dynamics between David and Kyle became a significant focus during the sentencing phase of their trials. A court-appointed psychologist who evaluated both defendants concluded that David's desire to support Kyle's business interests had overwhelmed his judgment about legal and ethical boundaries. Mr. Chen appeared to view his son's activities as an extension of his own business success, the psychologist wrote in her report. He expressed pride in Kyle's initiative and sales ability even when discussing activities that were clearly criminal. The family relationship created a blind spot that prevented him from recognizing the seriousness of enabling theft. The psychologist's analysis helped explain why David had been so dismissive of my concerns about inventory discrepancies. He hadn't been negligent or inattentive. He'd been actively protecting Kyle's operation by deflecting attention from the missing equipment. Kyle's psychological evaluation revealed a different but related problem. The report concluded that Kyle had developed an inflated sense of entitlement based on growing up as the son of a successful business owner. He appeared to view company resources as family assets that he had a right to use for his own benefit. Mr. Kyle demonstrated limited understanding of the distinction between family wealth and business assets, the psychologist noted. He seemed to believe that his father's ownership of the company gave him personal rights to company property, regardless of legal or procedural requirements. These psychological insights provided context for understanding how the theft scheme had developed, but they didn't diminish the legal consequences that Kyle and David faced. The restitution process took over a year to complete. While Kyle's eBay accounts and bank assets were seized immediately, recovering the full $45,000 in stolen equipment value required tracking down individual pieces of equipment that Kyle had sold to buyers across the country. Our insurance company hired a specialized asset recovery firm that worked with law enforcement to contact Kyle's eBay buyers and negotiate the return of stolen equipment. In many cases, the buyers were cooperative once they understood they'd unknowingly purchased stolen goods, but the process was time-consuming and expensive. Some buyers who had purchased equipment months earlier had already resold or disposed of the items, making recovery impossible. In those cases, the insurance company had to absorb the losses, though they pursued civil litigation against both Kyle and David to recover those costs. The asset recovery process also revealed additional victims beyond TechSource. Investigators discovered that Kyle had been stealing and reselling equipment from his college's computer lab, using similar techniques to bypass inventory controls and avoid detection. The University of Colorado Denver investigation led to additional criminal charges against Kyle and resulted in his permanent expulsion from the university. His theft of college equipment had been smaller in scale but had been ongoing for almost 2 years, suggesting that his criminal behavior had been escalating in both scope and sophistication. The university case also provided insight into how Kyle had developed the technical skills necessary to forge purchase orders and manipulate inventory systems. Campus investigators discovered that Kyle had taken multiple courses in business information systems and had used his legitimate coursework as training for criminal activities. He was literally using his college education to become a more effective thief, the university's security director told me during a follow-up interview. The same database management and electronic document skills that were supposed to prepare him for a legitimate business career were being applied to fraud and theft. The broader implications of Kyle and David's case extended beyond the immediate criminal and financial consequences. Their convictions contributed to increased industry awareness about the vulnerabilities created when family members work together in businesses with access to valuable assets. Several professional organizations in the technology consulting industry developed new guidelines for companies that employ family members, emphasizing the need for additional oversight and control measures when relatives have access to company resources. Colorado Technology Council, a professional association that David had been active in for years, created a case study based on the TechSource theft scheme. The case study is now used in professional development workshops to help other business owners understand the risks of inadequate internal controls and the importance of separating family relationships from business oversight. The Federal Bureau of Investigation also used the case as an example in its white-collar crime prevention outreach programs. The sophisticated use of employee credentials and online marketplaces to facilitate theft represented an emerging pattern that law enforcement wanted other businesses to recognize and prevent. My role in exposing the scheme led to several speaking opportunities at industry conferences and professional development events. I've spoken about fraud detection, inventory management best practices, and the importance of following through on investigations when something doesn't seem right about company processes. One of the most common questions I receive during these presentations is whether I regret reporting David and Kyle's activities, given the devastating impact on their lives and the disruption to TechSource business operations. My answer is always the same. Reporting criminal behavior isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about protecting the integrity of business relationships and ensuring that other employees and companies aren't victimized by similar schemes. If I hadn't investigated the inventory discrepancies and reported my findings, Kyle's theft operation would have continued to grow. The email evidence showed that he was already planning to expand into other product categories and was considering recruiting additional accomplices within the company. More importantly, Kyle's scheme was designed to frame me as the responsible party if the thefts were ever discovered. If company auditors or law enforcement had investigated the missing equipment without understanding Kyle's role, all the evidence would have pointed to me as the person who had made unauthorized purchases using my employee discount. By conducting my own investigation and documenting the evidence properly, I protected myself from criminal liability while ensuring that the real perpetrators faced appropriate consequences. The experience also reinforced my belief that professional integrity requires active vigilance, not just passive honesty. It's not enough to avoid committing fraud yourself. When you discover evidence of fraud by others, you have a responsibility to report it and ensure that appropriate action is taken. Today, as IT procurement director for our expanded organization, I've implemented multiple safeguards designed to prevent the kind of scheme that Kyle orchestrated. All equipment purchases require electronic approval workflows that create permanent audit trails. Employee discount codes are regularly rotated and monitored for unusual usage patterns. Inventory management includes random audits and real-time tracking of high-value equipment. But the most important change has been cultural rather than procedural. Our organization now emphasizes that employee benefits like discount codes are privileges that come with serious responsibilities, and that abuse of those privileges will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. We also provide regular training on fraud recognition and reporting, ensuring that all employees understand how to identify and escalate concerns about potentially criminal behavior by colleagues or supervisors. Kyle and David Chen case serves as a permanent reminder that family relationships in business settings require extra scrutiny rather than extra trust, and that the digital evidence of modern fraud schemes provides both the means for criminals to operate and the tools necessary to achieve justice. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever suspected that family members were getting special treatment at work that crossed ethical or legal lines? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about workplace justice and standing up to nepotism and fraud. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that company equipment and discount codes are privileges that come with serious responsibilities. When those privileges are abused for personal profit, the digital evidence of that abuse can and will be discovered.